Hello, and welcome to my spoiler review for The Conjuring 2, where James Wan made yet another highly crafted horror film that kind of goes along with the classic stylings of the genre, but he didn't really push the edge of the envelope, as I said in my non-spoiler review. But here, we're gonna talk specifics. But what I want to start with, actually, are the few things that I think mixed it up a little bit, at least this time, that maybe were there in the first Conjuring, but I felt were highlighted more so in the second entry. And the first of those, it's two things, and the first of those two things would be religion. As I said in my non-spoiler review, this is a surprisingly religious film, and in a very positive way. A lot of times in today's modern media, religion is, portrayed as kind of zealous, right? Or like people who are really religious or are antiquated or something like that, right? But here, this movie really embraced religion, which I thought was kind of progressive in a way, especially because so many people today are still very, very religious. And I wonder if this will help the movie at all at the box office. They haven't really played it up that much in the marketing. There's one poster, actually, where they have the rosary, around Lorraine Warren's hand, and you can see Janet in the window. And they're actually playing off of the most religious scene in the movie when Lorraine banishes the demon from the room. But it reminded me actually a little bit of The Exorcist, and there was a little bit of a discussion recently about The Exorcist because they recently remade it, or they're thinking of remaking it, or whatever. And it struck me because a fan in the comment section had written and said, well, this was on some other coverage, not a video that I made. But I read someone's comment, and they said, they changed in the remake, or the Redux. They made the mother of, Linda Blair's character, they made her very religious, right? And they said the interesting thing about the original Exorcist is that the mother wasn't religious, and she had to come to terms with what's happening to her daughter, and that perhaps religion does exist, that whole thing. So that was like the last horror movie, and that's why I bring it up. I think that was the last horror movie that was really interesting in terms of incorporating religion in like a intellectual way, not like in a either like a scandalous way or a way just to try and be conversational or tabloidy, I guess is the good word. So I liked that aspect quite a bit, and I almost wish the movie played up religion even more, even beyond the little couple of things that Lorraine Warren said about it, and also that Ed said about it. I would have liked if they'd really played up the personal strength that it gave both those characters. I think it was only hinted at, and maybe the movie would have seemed a little bit more sophisticated and would have gone a little bit outside of James Wan's comfort zone if it had had that layer a little bit better established. So I thought that was a very interesting part of the movie. And I'd be curious to how you guys reacted to it. I know that a lot of people today aren't quite as religious as they once were. It's fallen out of fashion, so to speak. So I'd be very curious to know if you thought that was interesting in the movie, if you didn't like it being in the movie, or if you're a religious person, if you were happy to see it, or if you feel it's still tabloidy. All right, so that's the first thing that I thought was a little different about the movie. I also really liked its message about marriage, and that the Warrens were very much a team, and that they both told the same story about, what I did when I found the person who believed in me the most? I married him, or I married her. It was very romantic. I thought it was very nice, and I think, I thought that it was nice that it gave Janet such comfort. And I almost expected her to go a little like, Lolita on poor Ed Warren. I was like, oh, watch out, you guys are talking a little bit too much romantic stuff with this kid. But luckily, she went the nice route and said, oh, you said it was nice if you have one person who helps you. I had two. And I was like, well played, Janet. Thanks for not being a creeper. But it was a very romantic discussion. And I think, I don't know, at the same time, while I appreciated that they relied on each other so heavily, it did kind of suck some of the romance out of their relationship almost. Like, we're together because we're the only ones who believe one another, not because we're in love. I mean, I can understand that marriages for a long time, especially the Warrens at this point in their marriage, they've been married for a while, and, the way you see a person in your life evolves or, becomes comfortable, the dreaded comfortable, like, is that something to be scared about? And so that also is a very complex, sophisticated discussion. And again, a discussion that the movie only touched upon. And I would have liked to have maybe seen it touch upon it a little bit more and explored a bit more. I guess she felt nice with that Elvis Presley song that Ed sang, right? That made her feel very romantic. But I would have liked to have seen a few more romantic moments between the two of them to show that spark was still there. That they not only still leaned on each other very heavily, but that they still, I wouldn't want people to think like, it kind of was depicted a little bit as a loveless marriage, I guess, to some degree. I don't know. But I liked certain aspects of it quite a bit. So the next thing I want to talk about in the spoiler review is merry old England, because I thought that James Wan did a really nice job moving the action to a different country, right? So far, he's really only made horror movies in the good old US of A. He, of course, actually is not from the US. He's from Australia, as some of you pointed out in my non-spoiler review, because Francis O'Connor, my mistake, is also from Australia. But he did a nice job, I thought, with England, particularly at the beginning with the montage and London Calling and cutting to that and creating this really great feel of London, not just London, but London in the 1970s. So I thought that was really great. And it did make the film feel a little bit fresher and a little bit different also from his other projects. None more so than The House. The House had a very UK layout, British government housing, but something, as I said in my non-spoiler review, which was also reminiscent of The Babadook, where they had a similar house as well. And not only was the layout similar, but it was another situation where you were like, this house should be torn down. It seems not up to code inside. I don't know if this is something that happens all the time in England, but I felt that someone could do a news story on the poor, housing that the government is providing and how it seems like it's got a lot of mold and mildew and it's falling apart and it just really isn't suitable, for, I think that people would complain. But also, we've seen different types of housing, government housing in England, for instance, in Kingsman, in Attack the Block, and we've seen government housing portrayed to some degree. Actually, they haven't done very much showcasing of that in mainstream American cinema, which is interesting. But anyway, that's a conversation for another time. But I did think it was interesting when they very briefly brought up and said, oh, do you think the mother's just doing this to get better government housing? That's where this ruse is coming from. But, again, there were, I think that in favor of doing his formula, his traditional formula, which is very popular, so I think that I totally understand why he went that way, there were other things that he could have gone further on. Government housing in England, that's why maybe where the skepticism comes from, a little bit of class warfare maybe, right? The marriage, the religion. I think there were directions to take this that would have maybe made it seem a little bit fresher than it seems. Also, Christmas in England. I was surprised this movie had a Christmas feel to it. I was like, then why would you release it closer to Christmas? And I can't imagine anyone wanting this to be a part of their Christmas collection. But who doesn't like to see Christmas lights? No one's ever going to feel bad about that. But I don't know. I wasn't quite sure why they threw that in there. I guess because so much time had passed. But still, it was slightly distracting in a summer release. And the next thing I want to talk about is The Demon Nun. Now, I had said this was a guy in drag. I believe I owe actress Bonnie Aarons an apology. She actually seems to be an actress. I'm not sure if she's transgender or not. I can't find out if she is. I'm just not quite sure. There isn't a lot of news about her, but the most coverage she's gotten is that she's apparently very well known in some circles for portraying the bum in Mulholland Drive. That's the name of her character, and she made a similar impression there. Now, some people said this was a spoiler in my non-spoiler review, and that it's not. That's not like a reveal like you've seen in the Insidious movies, and that's my bad. I should have clarified that. But I just felt the reason I had brought it up is that I felt it was very derivative of the Bride in Black in the Insidious films. And I think I would have maybe gone for something a little bit different here. Although we'll talk about the Crooked Man in the Scares section, although the Crooked Man I felt was very derivative of the Babadook. So it's tough, with so many movies coming out these days. It is a struggle to try and be original. But as I said, they had several areas where they could have done that, and they didn't do it there either. But I thought one of the best sequences in the movie involved the demon nun, and that was in the study, the Warrens' study, when Lorraine went to follow it into the study and locked the door and told her daughter not to come in there. And then I thought it was great when the shadow came behind the painting and then the nun came out from behind the painting. That was really well done. That was like classic James Wan, and I think it was a very good example of just like when he does things right, he really does them right. Although I did think that the idea of the demon name, like we'll have power over this demon if we know the demon's name. And when the demon told me the name, I wrote it in the Bible. That made sense, but I felt that it was really convenient, and it was a little bit too convenient for, I think, a James Wan movie. I'm like, come on, James Wan, you're a lot of movies into your career at this point. I think you could afford something that's a little bit more clever, and also that makes a little bit more sense. Like, this just fell into place really easily. Like, there was no struggle. How did it occur to them? By the way, they said, you have me before, as soon as you're born, and you have me until you die, right? And they're like, a name. And, I would have been, it's funny, I went to a private school here in New York City, and one of the things they always talked about was that, and I remember being annoyed about this, is that they said, in private school, they teach you to consider every option, right? To always to think that everything is debatable, and to always give every possible answer, like the full attention that it could be. And they said that that's really bad for standardized testing because there's only supposed to be one clear answer. And this was someone who was helping all the kids in my school, and myself included, try to study for these standardized tests. And she had said it because she was very frustrated that we all kept having problems on them because we were like, no, I can actually argue all A through D or A through C, or, I think it was always A through D. We can argue A through D. And she's like, no, it's like this clear one, and you're not going to be able to do well on these tests if you don't decide that. And the reason I bring that up is because I would have been like, well, some kids, parents don't decide the name until after the child's born, so that wouldn't qualify for this. So I never would have been able to save anyone. I would have still been like, I don't know what the riddle means. So it's a good thing the Warrens didn't go to private school. But I just, I felt it was just a little bit too obvious, and it was too hard to connect the dots on that one, and it was a little too movie logic. All right, so like the best written movies, they can be solved by the viewer if given enough time. All right, so anyway, speaking of kids, I felt that the Warrens' daughter was wasted, and I also was like, doesn't your daughter mind that you guys like go off on these long trips and you don't involve her, right? I mean, it's kind of weird. It's a little like the Americans, right? Like, they're having a lot of problems with their daughter Paige. The Americans has been so good lately. I don't know why she's like, where are you guys going? And don't you think I'm in danger? If there are demons walking around the house, I should be prepared and know how to handle it. But anyway, and then I was like, are you going to have that daughter grow up and continue the franchise, perhaps? I was like, if I were an agent of an actress, I'd be calling up James Wan, and I'd be like, do you want to do another The Conjuring movie and perhaps focus on the Warren's daughter? And my client could play her, lower the age demographic maybe a little, make it fresh somehow. That was a pitch that was gestating in my mind while I watched the movie. Otherwise, she was wasted. All right, so anyway, next I want to talk about the scares in the movie. Yes, it's a very scary movie. I hid my face for a large portion of this film. Now, a number of people always ask me this, and they're like, is it all jump scares? And I would say it's some jump scares, but, I feel like it's important to really highlight that James Wan is a big believer in anticipation, like Alfred Hitchcock. I've said this before, but if you haven't heard it, the famous Alfred Hitchcock quote is that if a bomb goes off, suddenly you just have a quick scare of the audience, and that's it. However, if you tell the audience that the bomb is set to go off and it's in this box under this chair, and you let them know that, then you can get a lot more out of the scene and a lot more tension and a lot more terror and frightening. And I think that James Wan really has taken that advice to heart. Maybe he actually heard that quote, but either way, he is somebody who uses that. And I think that I appreciate the long takes that he has. Actually, I was just watching London Has Fallen last night on iTunes. Really cheesy, stupid movie, but that's part of its charm. Although some people tweeted me back that they felt that London Has Fallen was kind of unfair to the Muslim community, and I would agree with that. I think that was unfortunate, but that's just part of like the America, F yeah mentality of that film. But the reason I bring it up is that in the making of video, which you should definitely watch if you end up buying it on iTunes, they said that they don't want to have a lot of quick jump cuts like they usually do in action movies, and that by having longer takes and steady cam, that it created a better connection with the audience. And the reason I bring that up is because I think that James Wan does that as well. A lot of horror movies today, quick kinetic cutting, POV shots, found footage. But this was great because James Wan, you were in the hands of a professional, and he would do long takes. He would set it up. The wonderful establishment of the house when he would go through the vents and the ducts and the windows and up the stairs. It was just really nice. And the way he set up that like little teepee that the younger son made, and how that factored in later. I mean, it was just really good, and I liked that. As for one of the scariest things was the Crooked Man. I was like, are you going to do the Crooked Man? I hope you do the Crooked Man. And they did not disappoint with the Crooked Man. The Crooked Man was absolutely terrifying. In fact, I wish they'd used the Crooked Man more. However, it was very similar to the Babadook, and so I couldn't give them total high marks for that because of the derivativeness. Then also with James Wan, I wanted to talk about something that I thought was probably the highlight of the film. And, they further highlighted it by having the discussion between Bill Wilkins' spirit and Ed Warren at the end of the movie, the real recording, which I almost was like, I don't know if I should listen to this, okay? Because I was just so freaked out to some degree. But that was one of the coolest sequences in this movie that I think is probably going to be like, even more so than The Crooked Man. I think it's going to be like kind of like what sticks with you most from this movie. And it was really cool because it was very subtly done. It was a long take, and they were able to shift the focus in the background. And you might have noticed this, that at first you see Janet, and then you can see out of focus the shadow of Bill Wilkins, and then it goes back to Janet. And that's really cool. They did a very good job with that. And I liked Patrick Wilson as Ed Warren's. I like his colloquialism, that he was like just this American guy, like having a beer with the spirit, right? And talking to him and being real frank. We're just going to get down to brass tacks. And I liked that. I thought that was really good. It was probably, I think, one of the strongest moments, if not the strongest moment in the movie, because it was good. It was well done cinematically. It was well acted. It had good character moments. It was good character definition. I thought it was really, really good. As for the Warrens themselves, it's kind of weird. I mean, the whole appeal of the Warrens is that this stuff really happened. And I thought it was interesting that they touched on the Amityville thing at the beginning of this movie because that's such a famous case that has been immortalized by other movies. So I think that's one of the reasons they've been reluctant to do it here. But they did touch on it, It's kind of the formula they had for the first Conjuring, right? Where they did the Annabelle case just a little bit, and then they moved into the bulk of the movie. And the Annabelle became a spin-off. So maybe they will do an Amityville story. Who knows? But I felt that they lost a little bit of the realness with this movie. I didn't quite feel like the Warrens were as genuine. And I can't quite put my finger on why. They had them on that talk show, but maybe I would have liked to have seen that played up a little bit more, right? Because there's no more stories like this today. And were the Warrens what drove this craze of the paranormal, believing it to be true? Is the new advent of technology made it less believable that this stuff, like in the 70s, it's like, ooh, grainy footage, audio recording, right? Maybe it was easier to fool people, or people were just, they had to have more faith in it, speaking of faith. And maybe that would be an interesting discussion if they do go with the daughter ever for like a spin-off of this or to continue the franchise. Like, what would it be like if the Warrens existed today? That would be very interesting to me, I think. But here, I think they lost a real-world aspect to it, and I'm not quite sure why. But I still like the Warrens very much. I think Vera Farmiga is excellent in this movie in particular. She was in the first Conjuring, but this one really focused on her very strongly. And I thought the premonition of her husband's death was a great gift to the storyline and also to Vera Farmiga as an actress. I think that she played it very well, and I think it was interesting that she didn't tell him right away. And I think it's because of having that premonition have any power over him. Like, you could see her understanding, and that it was about, again, faith and trust, and they were dealing with something that, maybe to share that premonition would have given that premonition power. I thought that was really cool. I thought that was one of the best things about it. And I thought Vera Farmiga, and I liked that they cast her in the role. There's always the tendency in Hollywood to go with the hot babe, and I thought that Vera Farmiga is still very, has an earthiness to her, a relatability factor, but yet still very much seems like, Ed Warren's wife, but she also seems very real. And so I think that one of the best things that this franchise did was cast Vera Farmiga as Lorraine Warren. So I think she does a very good job with her scenes, like on the swings with Janet. I thought that was very good too. She's very good, very, very good. And Patrick Wilson's good too. I think Patrick Wilson's good. I think that he doesn't, I'm not quite sure with him. I think that sometimes they try and do the 70s styling. I think my biggest problem with Patrick Wilson is he looks so little like the real Ed Warren. Talk about casting like the hot, sexy actress. They kind of did that with the actor here, which I always found a little bit weird. I think because James Wan has a good relationship with Patrick Wilson. They made the Insidious movies together, which Patrick Wilson then quit from. But he does a good job. I think he does a good job. And I thought it was, I thought there was another interesting part of the movie when they talked about having the man around the house because, Frances O'Connor's husband had left and what it was like to have a guy around again. And that's why I think there was kind of that vibe with Janet a little bit, right? Like, everybody kind of fell in love with him a little bit when he sang that song, like not just Lorraine, but everyone. I thought maybe Ed should have been a little more sensitive to that. Like, that's something that bothered me a little bit. I was like, Ed, you're not going to stay around forever. You're going to leave, so you shouldn't try and be the de facto husband for like a little bit of time. I think that's a little bbit careless and insensitive to these people after you leave. But that was a choice for the character in the movie. That wasn't anything to do with Patrick Wilson. But, it was, something that rubbed me just a little bit the wrong way while watching the movie. Then as for Madison Wolfe as Janet, she did a great job. And she's not even British, which, as I said in my non-spoiler review, is shocking that someone that age can do such a good accent and do, and act and do so many crazy things at the same time. That takes a lot of concentration, right, to be working on multiple levels. So kudos to her. She did a really nice job. And also I like that she looked so much like a kid, like she was very much like from the Steven Spielberg school of casting kids. Also, it was take place during the 70s, right, when Spielberg made a lot of his movies, 70s, 80s. So that's when he was casting kids, and they were in similar, clothing and hairstyles. But I thought she did a really nice job. And she had to sell a lot of this movie, both the Bill Wilkins possession and the terror of being attacked by Bill Wilkins and this demon nun, whatever. And I thought that was good too. And so that was all on the actress. That's like some special effects, but she has to sell a lot of that, and she was able to do it. And then as for Frances O'Connor, I had to touch on her. She is Australian, as many of you pointed out, but I thought her working class British accent was very good. She never went Eliza Doolittle on anyone. And I thought she did a nice job. I think that she was very sympathetic as the mother, and I think she had enough edge when she needed to, and I liked that quite a bit. I thought she was well cast as well. Another very real casting choice, right? Then finally, I wanted to talk about the Enfield Poltergeist, right? Now, I was glad that they brought in that whole idea of, are they making this up? But I felt that could have been stronger. I think that could have been woven more throughout the entire narrative. Are the Warrens being taken? The Warrens, so much of their reputation hinges on them being authentic. Forget the church. Like, that, of course, is important. The church needs to protect its image as well. But what about the Warrens? And maybe when they reach this level of fame, are they at all worried about someone trying to capitalize on their fame by duping them, right? Like, I thought that was weird that I'm not sure if they should have used it or not. I mean, again, it wouldn't be following the James Wan formula, but I think it wasn't totally true to the whole story of the Enfield Poltergeist. And also they had the media come in and they had the TV interview, but maybe I would have been interesting to, instead of introducing this from this family's point of view, it would have been more interesting to show it from the media and how England was perceiving it at the time, and then to have the audience meet this family at the same time that the Warrens do, right? Maybe that would have played it up a little bit better. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to do it. I just know that what we got was very good, extremely good, very well crafted, but a little formulaic at this point, and the same old from James Wan. So I guess part of me is just kind of like, could we have done anything else with it? Could we have thought a little outside of the box? Could we have pushed the edge of the envelope, right? I think you should always be trying to improve. So that's my thoughts on The Conjuring 2. It didn't stick with me like the first Conjuring. For some reason, it didn't quite stick the same way. And I'm not sure if it's the movie or just the repetitiveness of the James Wan formula at this point. We'll see. But I certainly recommend it if you're looking to have the crap scared out of you in a masterful, non-torture porn way. So I look forward to continuing the conversation down below. Thank you so much for discussing this movie with me, and you can check out some other episodes right now.